At this time, let's begin today's 2017 State Energy Efficiency Scorecard webinar. It is my pleasure to introduce your first speaker today, Steve Nadel, Executive Director of ACEEE. Steve, you have the floor.
Okay, thank you very much, and welcome everyone to our webinar. This is our 11th annual State Energy Efficiency Scorecard. We found these scorecards very useful for helping to track state progress on various energy efficiency achievements and policies, but also to spur states to improve their efforts, as there's a little healthy competition between states. This year we have a number of interesting findings and changes from last year, which we'll get to very shortly. I'd first like to thank the U.S. Department of Energy for largely funding this effort, and we'll hear from DOE a little later as well. With that, let me turn this over to Weston Berg, who is the lead author of the 2017 ACEEE State Energy Efficiency Scorecard. Weston?
All right, thanks very much, Steve. Thanks for the introduction. So this is Weston Berg. I'm a research analyst at ACEEE and the lead author of this year's State Energy Efficiency Scorecard. As Steve mentioned, this is the 11th annual scorecard, and I'm excited to share the results and an update on all the recent progress states have made towards achieving energy savings. We saw a lot of great news on multiple fronts across all regions of the country this year, showing that policies geared toward reducing energy consumption continue to be seen as a compelling, low-cost way to meet energy needs. So first, a little bit about ACEEE. We're a not-for-profit research group serving as a catalyst to advance energy efficiency policies, programs, and investment. We focus on efficiency in the industry, buildings, and transportation sectors. In addition to state-level research, we also have folks with a focus on national policy, local-level policies, and utility policies. Earlier this year, in fact, we released our City Energy Efficiency Scorecard as well as our inaugural Utility Efficiency Scorecard. So definitely would urge folks to check those out if you haven't already had the chance. So just a quick background on the scorecard. We've been putting this out annually for 11 years. The first scorecard was published in 2007, and over the years we've continued to try to refine our methodology and data collection to provide the best report we can. But basically, the report provides an annual benchmark of state energy policies and progress, not only to highlight the achievements of higher-ranking states, but also as a comparative tool to direct states towards best practices and case studies from their regional neighbors. In the absence of a uniform national energy efficiency standard, policy decisions related to efficiency are often left to states, meaning that state policies are often the key drivers for spurring investment in innovation and efficiency. So with that, let's go ahead and get started with the results. So without further ado, here you see the 2017 scorecard map, including all 50 states and DC, based on 6 policy metrics, including utility savings, transportation and building sector efficiency, as well as state-led efforts. States in dark blue are those that perform particularly well in the scorecard, while the lighter shaded states are those we see as having the most opportunity to improve. Some of you will recall that last year Massachusetts and California finished in a tie for first place. This year Massachusetts actually edged ahead to claim the top spot, taking first place for the 7th consecutive year. Close behind was California in second place, as well as Rhode Island in third place. Massachusetts continued to lead the nation thanks to strong efficiency efforts across multiple policy areas. In particular, the policy framework set under the state's Green Communities Act a decade ago has really enabled the state to ramp up savings each year, and its efficiency targets are really among the highest in the nation. Massachusetts has also been really active with its recent Affordable Access to Clean and Efficient Energy initiative, which aims to reduce the energy burden for low-income residents. California also continues to be up front and center in the scorecard, finishing second. In late 2015, the state passed some game-changing legislation setting new building energy benchmarking and data sharing mandates, as well as setting goals to double energy efficiency savings by 2030. California also continues to be a leader in establishing appliance standards that serve as a model for the rest of the nation. This year, they actually became the first state to approve efficiency standards for laptops, desktop computers, and monitors, which are expected to start taking effect in January. States with a star next to their name on the map indicate those that were most improved this year, which included Idaho, Florida, and Virginia. Each of these states has seen a lot of progress in recent months towards strengthening efficiency in the building sector with updates to their building energy codes. Both Florida and Virginia are expected to begin implementing the 2015 IECC by the end of the year. So just to provide a little bit of a closer look at Massachusetts, as you can see from the chart on the right, they really did perform well across the board in most of the categories we look at as part of the scorecard. In particular, they reported utility electric savings at 3% of sales, which is the highest we saw of any state this year. This can be really attributed to the state's legislation from 10 years ago, the Green Communities Act, that set the policy, really set the groundwork in terms of policy. Massachusetts has also been a leader in helping make sure their efficiency programs reach low-income customers, which can be an underserved market. This is a policy area we gave added consideration to this year with the addition of a one-point metric. The state's lean network in particular has been an example to others for how to effectively run low-income programs. In addition, the state has been active in other policy categories as well in the transportation sector by adopting California's low-emission and zero-emissions vehicle standards, as well as adopting smart growth statutes to protect open space and encouraging efficient use of public transit. So here you see the top 10 states, Massachusetts and California in the 1 and 2 spots. Rhode Island also made significant progress this year, pulling into 3rd place thanks to continued high utility savings and ambitious 3-year efficiency plans. In addition, Rhode Island also has made efficiency a focus of its GHG reduction plans and efforts to cut emissions 45% by 2035. The state's score also reflects its increased efforts to acquire energy savings from combined heat and power. Some other highlights, Vermont in 4th place. With an increase in savings in 2016, Vermont's already achieved almost 3/4 of the state's 3-year savings goal, with still 1 more year to go. Oregon in 5th place, which saw its highest ever year for electric and gas savings in 2016, exceeding its goals. In 6th place was Connecticut, which has long been a leader, driven by nation-leading investment in savings through Energize Connecticut and the state's efficiency fund. The state's Green Bank has also been a successful model for others, although there has been talk of a potential raid on the efficiency budget to help plug the state's deficit, which does have the potential to weaken efficiency efforts next year. In 7th place was New York, which has been one of the leading states in the movement to modernize the electric grid as a platform for distributed energy resources and pull in private investment towards the state's clean energy goals. The state's Green Bank is playing a central role in this effort. In 9th place was Minnesota, which continues to rank in the top 10, though we should mention that rural efficiency efforts suffered some setback this year following a bill exempting small electric cooperatives from the state's efficiency program. And finally, Maryland rounded out the top 10, passing a bill earlier this year codifying commission targets of 2% per year by 2020, which was really good news. So just to back up a little bit and explain what the scorecard addresses and what actually goes into each state's score, this chart provides a breakdown of the types of policy areas that we examine. We score on a 50-point scale with the relative amount of points achievable in each area based on our research of the potential efficiency savings in each policy area. So you'll see from the chart that the most points are achievable in the utility programs and transportation policy categories. In the utility programs category, we're looking at levels of spending and savings reported from utility efficiency rebate, audit, retrofit programs. In terms of transportation, we look at states with GHG standards for vehicles, consumer incentives for efficient vehicles, but also states emphasizing smart growth policies as well. And then moving on to the next. So not to hit you with too much information here, but this sort of lifts the hood on the previous chart to show all the different sub-metrics for each policy area that we look at as part of the report. So in the utilities category, in addition to savings and spending, we also consider which states have policies to spur utilities towards efficiency, such as savings targets under an energy efficiency resource standard, states that have decoupled revenue from sales, states with approved performance incentives to reward utilities for meeting targets. And I should also mention this year we added a new metric for state policies that strengthen efficiency offerings for low-income customers. This addition comes on the heels of recent research by some of my ACEEE colleagues regarding the low-income energy burden, finding that low-income households actually pay 3 times as much of on their household energy bills as a percentage of their income than non-low-income households. We also look at the stringency of state-level building energy codes as well, and some other policy areas which we'll touch on in a little bit. So the next few slides just give a breakout of the scorecard from a regional perspective. So starting with the Midwest, this region probably shows the most variety in terms of efficiency, with some states like Minnesota, Illinois, and Michigan near the top of the overall ranks. About half of Midwest states design their utility programs towards required savings targets, and those states are actually the ones we see leading the region. Minnesota has the highest targets, and as you might expect, reports the highest savings, really leading the region. But there's been a lot of efficiency news out of the Midwest this past year, with several states passing major energy bills to confirm, extend, or strengthen their savings targets. Perhaps most notably, Illinois last December raised their efficiency resource standards considerably, essentially doubling their savings targets. Although also in the news recently, we probably should mention the Commission did recently approve plans by Ameren to lower near-term targets somewhat. So we'll have to keep an eye on actual progress towards long-term goals in Illinois. Also in December, Michigan passed a bill renewing its EERS and RPS, extending their 1% savings targets through 2021, as well as adding tiered incentives to encourage utilities to exceed targets, as well as removing a previous cap on spending. Also good news this year, after years of relative inaction in Ohio, the state's efficiency standards survived an effort this year to extend a freeze of its targets that had been in place since 2014. Those standards resumed at the start of the year, thanks to a veto by the governor. And essentially by allowing the freeze to end, the 1% savings targets are back in place through 2020 and increased to 2% annually by 2021. So in the Northeast region, most states have long shown strong commitment to energy efficiency. Actually, half of the states in the Northeast, 6 of them, appear in the top 10. Many of which I had mentioned earlier on the top 10 slide, but actually all of these states appear in the top half of the rankings. The vast majority of these states have set a specific mandatory energy efficiency resource standard, establishing long-term targets. Some of the states appear just outside of the top 10 or have appeared in the top 10 in the past, such as Maine. New Hampshire in 21st is a state to keep an eye on, having approved its first EERS in 2016, which is set to take effect in 2018. So a lot of work was ongoing this year to address details of that and how that will roll out. So we could see a lot of improvement, expect to see a lot of improvement from New Hampshire in the near future. So for the Southeast, Florida led the region and also added a few points thanks to recent efforts to update its building energy codes. Their increase in score also reflects a new program from the State Energy Office providing free energy audits to agricultural operations, as well as grant funding to implement efficiency upgrades. But much of the Southeast really does fall in the bottom half of the rankings. Kentucky finished in the middle tier, with some support of compliance and training with respect to building energy codes, as well as some lead-by-example policies through benchmarking and reducing energy use in public facilities. But savings in Kentucky continue to still fall below the national average. Virginia was one of the most improved states this year. Not traditionally, all that supportive of efficiency, but there was some notable progress this year in updating their building energy codes. There was also big news this year with the governor signing an executive order directing state agencies to develop strategies to reduce GHG emissions. So that's another area we're keeping an eye on to see how efficiency might factor in. And we also shouldn't fail to mention Louisiana and Mississippi. Despite there being in the lower tier, Louisiana actually moved up 3 spots this year, with utility savings edging upwards with their transition from quick start efficiency programs to a more comprehensive second phase. Mississippi also running similar quick start programs, since 2014 has held proceedings as well to evolve their portfolio. So as I said, a lot of these states do fall, do fall a bit in the lower ranks, but there is a lot of progress that we're tracking moving forward. So in the Southwest, we've seen some strong performance from Colorado, Arizona, and Utah, all of which placed firmly in the second tier. Colorado in 15th, and Arizona and Utah tied for 17th place. This year, Colorado passed a bill to extend its utility efficiency programs for another decade, which was really good news. Arizona really posts the highest electricity savings in the region thanks to a robust efficiency resource standard. But there are still opportunities to improve there in the building sector. A common theme in this region is that a lot of the states are home rules, so although there might be a state building energy code, enforcement might vary across the state, often making for a patchwork of different codes. So improving energy code enforcement is often an area that we list as for improvement. Nevada had some big news this year, signing an energy bill directing the Utility Commission to establish utility savings targets, which should pave the way for future savings. Those targets are still to be decided in terms of how high they'll eventually be set, but we'll be keeping an eye on that for next year. We should probably also mention Texas was actually one of the first states to pass an energy efficiency resource standard in the late 90s. Since then, efforts to strengthen savings have lagged a little bit behind a lot of the country and their neighbors, but they have been proactive in terms of adopting up-to-date codes to strengthen efficiency in the building sector. So really a good deal of diversity of efforts in the Southwest as well that we're tracking. And just quickly in the Northwest, Oregon and Washington have both been clear leaders in the region thanks to robust energy savings targets of around 1.5%. Oregon has the added benefit of a natural gas savings target as well, in addition to electricity. But Energy Trust Oregon has long been the leader, offering a really comprehensive portfolio of programs. Idaho, I should mention again, added the most twist score this year, rising in the ranks from 33rd to 26th. And adding 3.5 points to its score. Idaho hasn't historically had that much focus on efficiency in recent years, but utility savings have edged upwards recently thanks to resurgent levels of spending on demand-side management. Those savings have yet to rebound to peak levels seen in 2011. Currently, Idaho's in the middle of the pack in 26th place, still behind some of its neighbors to the west, but it does have opportunities to improve, such as by adopting utility business models more conducive to efficiency, like savings targets or performance incentives to reward utilities for efficiency. So there's certainly more policy tools available to them to make that jump. So just to take a step back and look at savings at a nationwide scale, in 2016, utility programs reported 25.4 million megawatt hours of incremental electric savings, a little less than 0.7% of sales, which is down slightly from last year. These are the smaller blue bars you see in the kind of towards the bottom of the chart. Total annual savings, on the other hand, continue to increase, as seen in the red bars. Annual savings include savings from efficiency measures not only from this year but also from prior years. And you can see those savings are dramatic and do continue to grow since most efficiency measures continue to generate savings for years after they're installed. But getting back just to the incremental blue bars, the trend we've seen over the past few years of increasing incremental savings didn't quite show up in the data this year, but we did want to point out just a few notes regarding this. Particularly the decline this year shouldn't be seen as an indication of diminishing efficiency efforts. In fact, half of states continue to increase both levels of efficiency investment as well as resulting incremental savings. The largest contributing factor to this year's decrease actually had to do with our ongoing effort to equitably compare savings among states with varying protocols. So there's kind of differences in how states report savings. It isn't really a uniform standard, so measuring requires some judgments about what savings would or wouldn't occur in the absence of a certain policy effort. So one example of this concerned our treatment of savings that utilities claim for support of codes and standards regulation development, which did have a noticeable impact on savings reported for California. So that actually accounted for a good deal of the drop this year. This is our most recent EERS map showing all the states with a long-term mandatory efficiency targets for utilities. There are now 26 states with an EERS, which can apply to either electricity or natural gas utilities or both, and can be adopted either through legislation or regulation. It's similar in concept to a renewable portfolio standard, but for efficiency. But as you can see from the map, all the top 10 states have an EERS in place, typically a fairly stringent one. And a few states took efforts to extend or strengthen their targets this year. I mentioned Illinois, which raised theirs significantly, but at the same time also included an exemption for some large customers, it should be noted. Maryland, Michigan, Colorado all extended their existing targets. Ohio, I mentioned, restored theirs. And Nevada, as I mentioned, passed a bill to set targets for Nevada energy, but those are still yet to be determined. So switching gears just a little bit, the scorecard also has a building energy codes category, which accounts for a significant amount of points, given that buildings do account for about 3/4 of national electricity use. We rate states both according to the stringency of their adopted codes as well as for demonstrating best practices for fostering compliance with those codes. But as you can see here, the states, you can see here how the states stacked up in terms of their scores and which ones have been diligent in updating codes to the latest IECC and ASHRAE. Generally, any state with codes comparable to the 2015 IECC or ASHRAE 2013 would receive top points. Though over the past year there has been development of the 2018 IECC and 2016 ASHRAE, which states have already started looking toward, including Maryland and Vermont, which are already looking at the 2018 codes. But the basic idea here in this category is that states with codes pegged to older model codes receive fewer points. But the states that really added the most to this category this year were Florida and Virginia, given their recent update efforts. So this slide is somewhat of a preview for next year's scorecard to consider. As mentioned, we currently score states according to which version model code they've adopted, but this can also pose a challenge in terms of ranking to provide an apples-to-apples comparison of actual savings across states. Due to a variety of factors, partly because states often don't just adopt the model code, but will usually add amendments to it that can weaken or strengthen the code. At the same time, there's been a growing movement towards zero energy buildings, such as in California, that set zero energy goals for new construction. So there's been a need for a common baseline in measuring actual overall energy intensity rather than looking on a state-by-state level at how states are performing with respect to a specific code. So the New Buildings Institute, which we worked with a bit this year, has undertaken efforts to do exactly that, accounting for all these various factors in a single index, including not only code amendments, but also differences in climate and building stock among states. So NBI's Zero Energy Performance Index uses data from PNNL to quantify expected energy use intensity from codes, which we hope to incorporate into next year's scorecard. So it's just something to look at for next year to help that we're hoping will help to provide more of a apples-to-apples comparison and align the scorecard with this effort to look beyond simply codes. So in addition, we also look at other policies state governments can take to spur efficiency, policies independent of ratepayer-funded utility programs. We award up to 3 points for state-run programs, state-run incentive programs like rebates, loans, and grants, sales tax exemptions. We also award a half point to states with active PACE programs, which allow property owners to finance efficiency through tax assessments on properties. Connecticut, for example, scored really well in this category with a whole range of programs, including tax credit programs for properties meeting LEED Gold standards, as well as loan programs supporting financing for multifamily housing efficiency. We also give credit to state governments that lead by example in setting requirements to save energy in public sector buildings and fleets. Most states have some sort of benchmarking requirement for public buildings, setting some sort of heightened fuel economy standard or procurement requirement for purchasing efficient government vehicles. So some recent examples include Rhode Island with the governor signing an executive order in 2015 calling for a 10% energy reduction in state agencies. Utah has enacted a similar requirement in 2015 for benchmarking energy use in state buildings. So just a few slides to summarize the report. So I already mentioned this a bit, but we have seen quite a bit of progress on building codes, states adopting the 2015-2013 ASHRAE. This year we saw a few others like Idaho, Florida, Virginia, as I mentioned, but there are some other states we're keeping an eye on as well for the future, Rhode Island, Delaware, Connecticut. In transportation, California, Massachusetts, and New York have continued to lead the way on energy efficiency. Oregon, Rhode Island, and Washington also did really well in this category. Most of these states have a vehicle miles traveled reduction targets in place. Rhode Island's been looking at VMT as part of its GHG reduction strategy moving ahead. With regard to combined heat and power, there's still always room for improvement here since it's a kind of a traditionally overlooked policy area. And by CHP, we're referring to states making an effort to promote systems that generate electricity and thermal energy in a single system. States that are providing incentives, streamlining policies to help bring them online. Illinois made some progress in this category this year thanks to some new CHP programs for commercial and industrial customers. So just quickly, some of the reasons we're seeing certain states falling in the ranks. I should note that just because a state falls in the ranks doesn't necessarily mean it's regressing or doing worse. It just might mean it's not keeping up with some of the other states that might be improving. And since many states are updating codes, strengthening their efficiency offerings, we do raise the bar each year or try to in our scoring in some categories. So certainly in the utilities chapter, states that might be standing in place in terms of savings with industrial opt-out programs that fail to include large customers might possibly see themselves slipping in the ranks. So these next couple slides just kind of sum up the overall themes and recommendations of the scorecard, the types of strategies we see as the most instrumental to improve energy efficiency. Probably the top strategy is establishing an energy efficiency resource standard to help lay that programmatic groundwork for what's achievable in terms of savings and working towards those goals, and then complementing those goals with revenue decoupling in conjunction with setting performance incentives to reward utilities for meeting those goals. Also important is ensuring equitable access to programs for low-income customers. Due to a variety of reasons, low-income and multifamily households are an underserved market, despite a disproportionate amount of their income going towards their energy bill. And regulators can play a key role in encouraging utilities to expand the role of low-income programs within their portfolios. Already mentioned, building energy codes. In terms of transportation, adopting stringent tailpipe emission standards and vehicle miles travel targets, but also other strategies like tax incentives for purchasing high-efficiency vehicles as well as electric vehicles. As I mentioned, policies that treat combined heat and power as an energy efficiency resource. CHP systems are great in that they're like basically super efficient mini power plants that generate electricity and recover heat for use in on-site processes. They also allow for a certain degree of self-sufficiency, given that they can run on a variety of fuels and keep the lights on, in the event that the power does go out for whatever reason. Also, state-led policies to encourage efficiency also shouldn't be overlooked. Lead by example strategies to encourage efficiency in public buildings and fleets, and by targeting financial incentives to homeowners, businesses, and others. And then there's also a growing movement towards looking for ways to attract private funds and combine it with public resources to achieve savings through institutions like green banks, like Connecticut and New York have, to lower the upfront costs for investments in efficiency. PACE financing, which I've mentioned, has also been a tool that's been gaining traction, something that states and local governments should consider. Most recently, Nebraska joined the PACE movement this year with Omaha starting a program. Alaska also recently adopted legislation to enable PACE as well, making it one of a little more than half the states that have done so. So with that, I didn't really have too much else, but you know, as you can see, there's been a lot of progress continuing at the state level in terms of efficiency, a lot to track moving forward for the 2018 scorecard. But I appreciate you know, having your time. And with that, I think I can turn it over to Kathleen Hogan, who's our Deputy Assistant Secretary for Energy Efficiency in the Office of Energy Efficiency and Renewable Energy. In this capacity, she oversees more than 600 million annual energy efficiency policy program and research portfolio, including advanced manufacturing, buildings, federal energy management, low-income weatherization, and intergovernmental partnerships. I should also say that we're really pleased that DOE funded this edition of the scorecard. So with that, I'll say, yeah, thanks, Kathleen.
And thank you, Weston, for what's a great comprehensive overview of what you've been able to see across the states this year. So it is a pleasure to be here and be part of this event. Certainly we see that it's one that generates more and broader interest year after year. And I think as we look across the country, we do see what an important role states and cities have in leading the charge to make our country be as energy efficient as possible. And of course, that's really about the benefits that we derive from energy efficiency in communities across the country. So indeed, today's 11th edition of the scorecard is an important event to see what type of progress is being made across the country by states, tribes, and territories. It really is great to see the progress, which is both essential and laudable. You know, efficiency is the least cost energy resource that is available to us and also drives job creation, improves energy security and reliability, and really is the first and best energy resource available in every state across the country. We see that there are cost-effective investments available and relevant in many aspects of our lives and our economy, you know, improving industry and improving industrial competitiveness, done in ways that can improve comfort and health in our homes and workplaces, and just really producing cost savings for families and businesses all over the economic scale. So really powerful stuff. And certainly this is why states, I think, continue to advance these policies and programs to help unlock these many, many benefits. So it is exciting to see some of the significant advancements states are making this past year, but as you pointed out, building upon many years of efforts in these areas. So, you know, we're seeing that states are using efficiency to create more reliable energy systems, using it as a job creation engine, and also just reducing costs for ratepayers by employing efficient programs and more. I guess some of our takeaways from this year are that, you know, roughly half of the states are reporting electric savings surpassing those that they posted in 2015. We're seeing utilities invest approximately $7.6 billion in energy efficiency and leading to savings of 2.5 million megawatt hours or more, so great savings. And as you pointed out, we continue to see strong progress in areas of building energy code adoption, increased efficiency in public buildings, which also reduce public expenses, and expanding access to financing and creating new financing opportunities so that consumers and businesses in many different places can invest in efficiency and get those returns. And I think you're also showing that, yet again, this scorecard shows us that a little friendly competition can drive state efforts forward. In that regard, I would like to express my congratulations to Massachusetts for achieving the state's highest recorded electricity savings at that great rate of 3% of sales, which did seem to help them edge out California this year for the #1 spot, which the two states did share last year. And it is great to see some of the states that are most improved, Idaho, Florida, Virginia, you know, closing in on those top-level spots. They did post great improvements in their individual scores over last year. But I think one of the things I want to stress is that every state that successfully deploys energy efficiency strategies is really a winner because of all the benefits that energy efficiency brings, with the benefits for industry, commercial businesses, and citizens alike. And I'd also like to acknowledge the staff of the state organizations and the other people they've been working with at the city, county level, because it is by all these folk working together that we continue to be able to see these great efforts bring energy efficiency to more and more places and more deeply as part of getting the economic, environmental, and energy benefits that are so important. So from DOE's perspective, we'll continue to be a partner with the states in many cooperative efforts to advance energy efficiency, continuing to provide access to actionable data and information that works for decision making, working with states to better design creative ways to deliver efficiency, continuing to improve our ability to measure and demonstrate savings, and doing what we can to equip states with tools to make the case and set goals and achieve results. In that way, we did recently release a report that quantifies the total residential, commercial, and industrial electric energy efficiency potential that is and remains to be at the state level. It shows that states can continue to cost-effectively save consumers and businesses over 740,000 gigawatt hours of electricity through 2035, which is roughly equivalent to about 16% of projected electricity use in the United States over this period. And this and other related information is available at our State and Local Solution Center and our Better Building Solution Centers. So I think my bottom line here is one, that we're making great progress, but that we are only getting better at making the potential for energy efficiency a reality. So I would also take the opportunity to encourage us all to double down on these efforts for the coming year to build upon our remarkable experience and progress. And we at DOE certainly look forward to continuing to be part of all of this. So with that, I will turn it over to Annie Gilleo.
Great, thanks Kathleen. This is Annie Gilleo. I am the State Policy Manager here at ACEEE, and I just wanted to take a quick opportunity before we turn it over to questions to point you toward the resources we've developed as part of the State Scorecard. We'll flip to a slide here that shows links to the State Scorecard where you can download the full report, as well as individual score sheets that detail how each state does in the State Scorecard and why. If you're interested in diving further into the details, I'd also encourage you to visit our state and local policy database, where we include all the information included in the State Scorecard, but in far more detail with links to relevant policy documents. So with that, I'd like to invite your questions and turn it back to our moderator to pick those questions that we have time for.
Great, thank you so much, Annie. Just as a reminder, if you'd like to ask a question, to open up your Q&A panel, type your questions into that text field that you should see at the bottom there, and then click on the send button to get your question into the queue. So I think we have a couple questions that have come in, so I'm going to go ahead and read off our first question, which comes from Bob Stoffel. And his question is, for states who upped their game this past year, what were the stated driving factors to initiate strategies for improvements?
Right. So this is Weston. I think, as I mentioned, really the states that are really have really improved the most are states that continue to up their energy efficiency resource standards. States that have performance incentives in place. States that have decoupled revenue from sales are really the states that are probably moving ahead the most in the rankings.
And this is Annie. I'll just jump in on top of Weston and say that states see a lot of reasons for upping their game when it comes to energy efficiency. Oftentimes it's an economic development strategy. It might be a part of environmental goals or goals for better serving specific markets, for example, as Weston mentioned, low-income customers. And Steve, do you have something else to add?
Yes, I was just going to say in the Midwest, I think, states like Illinois and Michigan that Weston mentioned that passed recent legislation, economic development was very important in saving people money. Virginia, I know the governor is interested in doing something about climate change, so that was a motivating factor there. The major motivations do vary from state to state.
Great, thank you guys so much. We do have another question that's coming from Wally Nixon from the Arkansas Public Service Commission. And his question is, does ACEEE recognize the Pay-As-You-Save program as an innovative financing technique that reaches low-income and rental households?
Hi, this is Annie. I'll jump in on this one. Wally, we have explored the Pay-As-You-Save program, and certainly many utilities are using it to reach their customers, especially in rural areas. We don't specifically point to types of utility programs in this report itself. However, we do mention the Pay-As-You-Save program in some of our other publications, including an upcoming report on successful low-income energy efficiency programs that will be released next month.
Great, thank you so much, Annie. Our next question is, can you talk more about Ohio and what they should do to improve their score? And that's from Danny Eldridge with the Hannah News Service.
Right. So this is Weston. So as I mentioned, Ohio is, they did make some progress this year with restoring their energy efficiency resource standard. That being said, there's plenty of other opportunities for them to improve. Their transportation efficiency score was pretty low this year, so there's definitely lots of opportunities for them to look at smart growth strategies, look at incentives for efficient vehicles, as well as building energy efficiency policies as well. I believe they're still working off the 2009 IECC as well, so there's opportunities there as well to update to more recent building energy codes.
Great, thank you guys so much. And just as a reminder, if you have a question, to open up that Q&A panel, type your question into the text field at the bottom there, and then click on the send button to get your question into the queue. Our next question is, given that state appliance standards have the potential to save incredible amounts of energy, ASAP potential annual electricity savings reach 41 billion kilowatts in 2035, why is it only given 4% of the points? Seems to be weighted inappropriately, and that's from Claire Miziolik.
Okay, this is Steve Nadel. I can answer that one. We used to give state appliance standards more credit, but gradually a lot of the state standards were replaced by national standards, so there was not that much differentiation, so we reduced the amount of points. That said, I'm aware a number of states are thinking about new legislation this next year, and to the extent we do get more differentiation among states, we're certainly going to consider whether to again raise that score, but that was why it's so low now.
Great, thanks so much, Steve. Our next question is from Jamie Hopkins, and it says, some states have very low utility scores. Do such states, particularly in the Southeast, have the potential for the higher utility scores of top states?
So I guess I don't completely understand that, the question, just whether or not those states have the most potential for improving their scores. They definitely do. I mean, a lot of the states in the Southeast don't particularly have, only Arkansas out of the Southeast states has a energy efficiency resource standard. And not many really have utility business models that have been, aligned for helping incentivize energy efficiency. So, there's a lot of room for improvement there, and a lot that states can do to look towards. Particularly Arkansas. Arkansas has a lot of best practices to look towards. So, definitely a lot of room for improvement in the Southeast.
Right. So this is Steve. I would add, yes, it may be challenging for some of the Southeast states to move up to Rhode Island or Massachusetts levels of performance in that category, but certainly they can all move up to an Arkansas level of performance. Arkansas has been doing an excellent job for quite a number of years and continues to ramp up their targets.
Great. Thank you guys so much for that response. So we'll just give it a moment to see if any other questions come in. Our next question is from Kira Belpasht from the Environmental, and she's Environmental Commissioner of Ontario, and she wants to know, how do you determine how many points state initiatives obtain? Is it just the number of initiatives they have in place or projected savings? Seems like a challenging and subjective scoring process.
This is Annie. I'll jump in there. Kira, there are a couple of levels of response to that question. Firstly, we divide points amongst chapters based on our assessment of various potential studies that have been conducted in states across the country and where energy savings potential exists. So that gives the overall kind of number of points that are assigned to each chapter. Then within state initiatives, we're really looking at what states are doing, what up-and-coming policy opportunities are, and where we're seeing states invest significant effort. So it does change from year to year based on policy trends. And you're right, it is an art, not a science.
Right. And this is Steve. I would add, since the call came from Canada, I know we've talked to some groups in Canada about potentially assisting them on a Canadian provincial energy efficiency scorecard. Not definitely happening, but something under consideration.
Okay, great. And our next question comes from Clark Bizel, and he is from Green Design Advisors. Let me just find his question here. His question is, plug loads are typically not regulated or controlled by energy codes. What can be done?
This is Steve. There are some state efficiency standards that get at some plug loads. Weston, for example, mentioned new efficiency standards that California passed this last year on personal computers and monitors, for example. And I know a number of states are thinking about other things. They also can be very much part of utility programs. I know there's a number of efforts to incorporate these plug loads into various utility programs, whether it's smart power strips or other devices. The third thing I would note is that states, utilities can work either with retailers in their area to try to have initiatives that would encourage people to recognize and purchase the more efficient products. Maybe there'd be some incentives associated with it. These can be particularly effective if done at a regional level because many of the manufacturers and the wholesalers, supply to retailers in multiple states. But plug loads is an important and unfortunately growing energy use, but fortunately there's a lot that can be done to address them.
Great. Thank you all for your responses. Our next question comes from Sue Stafford with Mothers Out Front. And her question is, for high-scoring states, the score can actually be a disincentive to do more. How can high-scoring states be incentivized to do more and more and more?
So this is Weston. I definitely appreciate that question. I should mention that no states in the scorecard did get a perfect score, and each year we do try to raise the bar each year. So, you know, each year we're looking for ways to improve the scorecard. You know, this year we, you know, addressing the low-income energy burden and reaching out to low-income customers is always an ongoing challenge. So that's something, you know, we added as part of the scorecard this year. We might continue to refine that metric in the future. That being said, there's other, you know, metrics we're also we haven't included, you know, this year that, you know, we're hoping to include in the future, such as home energy labeling, which is something that's being considered more, and a policy that's starting to roll out more. So there's also, you know, in addition to what we look at as part of the scorecard, we are looking to, you know, continue to raise the bar in terms of our scoring metrics, as well as some of these other policies are up and coming, as well as, you know, I think I mentioned, you know, some grid modernization efforts, efforts to, you know, grow green banks and pull in more funding from private sources. So lots of things that states can still do, and we're hoping that the scorecard can continue to highlight some of those new and emerging strategies.
Right, and this is Steve. I would just add that in order to maintain a particular rank, generally you have to improve from year to year. If you just stay stable, other states may pass you. I know there's been quite a bit of competition in recent years between Massachusetts and California. We get questions all the time about, if we do this, you know, how much better could we do? Rhode Island is now nipping at California's heels, so even the top right states, if they want to stay top ranked, they're going to have to continue doing more. You can't just stand still.
Great, thanks everyone. We do have another question in the queue, and this is from Emma Forminger-Merchant with Green Tech Media. The question is, does ACEEE take into account the amount of money states invest? Somebody might have put us on hold just one moment. Okay, sorry about that. That was some music coming from somebody's line, so we've turned that off. So let's go to the next question here. The question is again from Emma, and the question is, does ACEEE take into account the amount of money states invest and the return on that investment in terms of efficiency? If not, why is this not a metric? I'm going to go ahead and unmute lines here. And Weston, I'm going to go ahead and unmute you now.
Sorry about that. I dropped off for a second. Could you restate the question again?
Absolutely. The question is, does ACEEE take into account the amount of money states invest and the return on that investment in terms of efficiency? If not, why is this not a metric?
Oh, no, we do include the amount of money that utilities and states are as a metric for how much is being spent on energy efficiency. I forget how many points that accounts for, around 2 points in our utilities chapter. We don't currently track cost effectiveness right now, but we do track the amount of spending that states are investing in energy efficiency.
Right. States differ too much on how they do cost effectiveness testing that when we've looked into that and trying to compare states, it becomes a hornet's nest.
Great. Well, thank you all again for your questions, and thank you all to our speakers for your responses. I think at this point I'm going to hand things back over to Annie for some closing remarks.
Great, thank you. Firstly, I want to thank all of our speakers for joining us today. I certainly enjoyed the presentation, and I hope you did too. I just wanted to echo back to some of the things that Kathleen had mentioned in her talk, that we're seeing states invest in energy efficiency for a variety of reasons, and all of these activities are exciting, but they're not done just because states want to invest in energy efficiency. They're doing it to create local jobs, to deliver energy bill savings to residents and businesses, to improve air quality in states and cities. So there are a lot of benefits that states are getting out of all of the energy efficiency policies that they're pursuing. I want to point you towards the scorecard for more information linked here on the slide, and encourage you to follow up with us if you have any additional questions. We're always happy to answer them. Thank you.
Great. Thanks again to everybody for joining us today and for all of your questions. This does conclude our 2017 State Energy Efficiency Scorecard webinar. You are now free to disconnect. Thank you.